course, our speaker today coming in from Liechtenstein. Hans, hello. Welcome to Earth Team. We've got Madison Moore Nicholson, our intern from American University here in Nairobi. Nigel Noriega, welcome back. Good to see you again. Peter Ngoha, Sumanta from Zinocast, Ritesh from Zinocast, and some others starting to come in. And Kartika, sorry, I didn't mean to. Kartika also coming in from India. So we're getting a good representation here. And I know some other people are going to come in, but let's just get started. For those who came on time, welcome. We are Earth Team. I'm Steve Gelstra. I'm the co-founder and co-chair of Earth Team, and we are a global alliance of individuals and organizations that share a vision of a world reset, very appropriate for today's talk, with temperatures cooling, species and habitats recovering, and communities safe from outbreaks and thriving. We have different backgrounds: wildlife protection, habitat protection, some work in public health, some in regenerative agriculture. And we've decided, instead of working in silos, we come together and try to fuse our activities, our efforts, and even our solutions toward a holistic planetary health approach to protecting our planet and people. So that's who we are. We meet here once a month in our town hall. We've got a coordination unit which meets more regularly. You'll hear some updates from them today. But why don't we open up the floor first to see if there's any updates people want to share from their own front line that they want other people to know about or help with. Anybody? I've got a couple myself, but I'll shut up for a second and yield the floor. I will just, I'll start it out then a little bit. I'll just let people know that in a couple of weeks' time, basically some of the Earth Team partners have been working together on a report that will be released to the public. It's looking at social media and online wildlife trafficking and what should and can be done about it. I won't give away the contents right now. I believe you'll be seeing something in the media about it. But if anybody is interested to help us amplify the distribution of that report, let us know. You can tell us in the chat. You can also join us after this town hall. We always meet for at least a half hour afterwards. And we do plan to get that translated into different languages because it is very much a global report. I'll tell you, it does concern Meta. We're on Facebook Live today, but what the heck? So it all goes both ways. Are there any questions about that or any updates that people want to share? Not yet. Okay. All right. Well, why don't you can always update us a little later and we'll go into the coordination unit update. We always try to update people on our activities in three areas: fundraising, solutions, and communications. Kartika, did you have anything you wanted to share on communications today? Sorry, I should have asked you that before the meeting, but we're natural and frontline here, so go for it.
Yeah, so we're in June and soon we'll be working on the second issue of our newsletter, Earth Pulse, and we are still awaiting two more features. One of the feature is in pipeline, so we welcome any stories relating to solutions and challenges for the new issue. So yeah, and for the solutions repository that we have. So we have around 80 more solutions in our pipeline ready to go on the map and on the website soon. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, if you didn't get a chance to see the last issue of Earth Pulse, we distribute it by email. It's also in the chat. But this will be issue number 2 coming up, where we focus in on problems and fixes and model fixes that can be amplified. Today, I think we should just combine fundraising and solutions. Basically, we've been putting a lot of time into our app and into the token. And we've been getting great help from Zinocast, which is here. The folks that are building the app and helping us design the token. We'll be hearing in a moment from Franz, who is helping us with the design of the whole ecosystem. But we're also going out to, test the app. This is the beta stage. We actually have a basic minimum viable product, an MVP right now. And we've been getting help from some interns, including Laureen and Madison. Not sure Laureen is here. Did Laureen make it? But Madison is here. So Laureen has been doing some market research on what we should call the token and how people are responding to it. Let me introduce Madison. Do you want to introduce yourself? Madison from American University. Madison Moore Nicholson.
Hi, everyone. My name is Madison. I'm a student athlete at American University in Washington, D.C. I study business administration with a focus on marketing, along with a minor in international studies. That's a bit about me. Um, in terms of some work I've been doing here at Freeland and Earth Team, yesterday we visited Comb Green Solutions. Um, which is an organization working in Nairobi's informal settlements along the Nairobi River. Their work basically focuses on environmental conservation within that community. This includes planting trees along the river and also maintaining a garden. Uh, Something that really stood out to me was that they're very community centered, being that a lot of the people involved in the organization are actually reformed criminals. Three of the main leaders of the organization being reformed criminals themselves, and also um, are helping the youth in that community reform by giving them an outlet, by having them be involved in their conservation efforts, which I thought was very interesting and very cool intersection. Um, They also are working to support the community by providing meals for children twice a week, Wednesdays and Saturdays. I believe they use uh, vegetables from their garden. And next week, we are going back to Comb Green Solutions to test the Earth Team app with them, help them upload and map their solutions, and help them to start earning those rewards that we talked a little bit about, which Lorene is figuring out a name for. But regardless, we are trying to start testing the market. And so we're going to try to start with organizations such as Comb Green Solutions, help get them on the map and get their name out there a bit more.
Great, good update, Maddie. And so that's Maddie's point of view. If you see the picture on the screen there that part of which is showing, that was a picture over her shoulder, looking at talking to one of the 3 leaders that we met with just yesterday. And I see Shelley Rothman on the call, and she'd appreciate, I'm sure others would too, that these folks have taken a very small piece of land, public piece of land, in a very degraded river system, just very trashy, very like we've seen this in different parts of the world. And they're growing trees along it to mitigate flooding. They're picking up the refuse. They are doing incentive systems like sports, and people can join in and get free balls if they bring plastics, et cetera. And so they're starting to clean all that up. But in the middle of it, they've also developed this hydroponic farm. And they're also doing grub soil cultivation. So we've invited them to give a spotlight talk, and they will probably be coming next month to do that. So. Okay, yeah, and I don't think Liza's here, so we won't get an update on the name, but after this call, we're going to put one more time the survey into the chat to see if anybody wants to give us their feedback on what we should be calling the token. We've got a short list of 4. And with that, I think this is a great segue, talking about planetary health, the token, etc., to our spotlight of the day. Franz Joseph Allmayer is a serial entrepreneur in the Web3 space. He works at the intersection of organizational design, digital infrastructure, and community activation. He bringing technology, ecology, and human collaboration to co-create regenerative economies, integrative governance systems, and innovative finance mechanisms. Coming to us today from his base in Liechtenstein, Franz has cultural roots in Austria and Guatemala. These contrasting yet complementary perspectives have allowed him to question cultural paradigms built on scarcity and separation from a very early age. Franz, you're also on our development team for the token and the app, and we welcome you to Earth Team.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Kartika, and everybody showing up today. Much gratitude, especially for you all holding the space for conversations like this to take place. Let me quickly pull up some of my presentation that I prepared for you. Let me know as soon as you can see something.
It's coming. It's there.
Fantastic. Yeah, what to say? I appreciate really again this space. It's really matters more than you might know, especially in times like this when the challenges keep arriving faster than we can process them. Feels like a roller coaster every day with new crazy news of something collapsing, something failing, and yeah, I think it's heavier one than the last before. So choosing to be here present in this conversation is a strong act of intention. So genuinely thank you for making the time. Steve mentioned, my name is Franz, and I am saying hello from the Alpine bioregion, to be more precise, the Principality of Liechtenstein, where among a few organizations, I lead a network of organizations, including Liechtenstein's Digital Innovation Hub, where we have been creating the different infrastructure for verifiable impact, and previously other forms of complementary currency systems, and essentially the core infrastructure that allows us to measure and value impact and make it also monetizable. All of my experiences have become a thread of a tapestry that I want to show you, give you a glimpse today. And I genuinely think that these technologies are needed right now, as you might know. Think about it as a sort of a digital commons, or as the title says, an operation system for communities that want to create real impact from the ground up, not the top down necessarily, that are not extractive, but really integral and regenerative and built to serve the people and places that are doing the actual physical work of healing and rebuilding that's so necessary. So let me start with a honest diagnosis, if you want to put it that way. I think, as you all know probably here, nature finance is not failing for lack of ambition. There is literally trillions of dollars that have been committed to nature positive outcomes by 2030. Nature finance is essentially failing because how we've structured the problem, really. And the traditional approach, as you see on the left-hand side, in this measuring, reporting, and verification technologies, we usually build them around isolated projects. Think about self-reported data, manual processes, audits that take 12 to 18 months even and cost more than many times the project themselves are worth just to verify. And critically, it measures usually only one thing, whether it's carbon, whether it's solely biodiversity, perhaps, if we're lucky, or if we're lucky, also just the community welfare. But again, never the whole system altogether. On the right side, you see the alternative in terms of what we're building. I call it more of a living ledger, where now the systems can continuously monitor, report, and verify, especially all of these 4 dimensions simultaneously, using continuous verified data that is not self-reported to also unlock automated flows of data that are not manual, and also get the full landscape scope and not just a single metric. And of course, this has to be independently verifiable, and it also has to be not costly, especially in terms of auditability. And all of it, instead of waiting 12 to 18 months for a certificate, the system should be able to process in real time. And these are some of the systems that we are deploying already with quite success in different parts of the world. So the gap, what I want to highlight, has never really been about the investment or about the money going in. The gap really has always been about this coordination infrastructure that allows all of these interrelations around a holistic framework of a project to come into coherence. Just 2 months ago, I think we also had an Earth team call where he was very well positioned as the gap, at the death gap for carbon credits. So this is exactly going along those lines. What I want to show you here is this concept of multiple forms of capital. And for most of our economic history, at least in the last several hundred years, we have counted one thing and one thing only, which is money. And that has overshadowed all of the other forms of capital. And as society, we have overemphasized that circle on the left-hand side, the red one, which is just about the money. And that has put ourselves into the focus of really what we can buy, what we can sell, and what we can price on a balance sheet. All of this putting the rest of those forms of capital into a market failure. But if you look at this diagram, you see a multiplicity of ways that value exists, flows, and compounds in a living community. And the uncomfortable truth here is our current economic system recognizes, if we're lucky, maybe one of them, officially 2 if we're generous. But if you think about what that means, is we have been running a civilization on a balance sheet that misses a big part of reality. Whether it's the living community, a living landscape, all of these things depend on all of these working together. And I think it's more than clear, and the research tells us also, and beyond the research, our observations, if we destroy any one of these forms of capital long enough, all the others begin to unravel. And I think this is also what we're seeing in real time, what's happening around the world today. So if you erode social capital, and financial capital soon follows. If you deplete living capital in an ecosystem, obviously the health of its society, time, and the bodies of the biosphere, everything else goes with it. In reality, these are not separate buckets. They constitute together what is in reality, in deep ecology, a web of life. And what we are building, and what this entire conversation points towards, is an operation system in which we can finally count all forms of capital and find the right place for them to do so. It actually alludes to also how do you make the invisible visible, that always has been real, but has been very difficultly been measured, which can allow communities to invest in, protect, regenerate all forms of capital they actually depend on. So the question is never whether these forms of capital exist, they always have. The question really is whether we are ready and able to account for them. So how does a promise become proof in this context. How does this actually work at a human level? What does it feel like on the ground? So every piece of meaningful community work, like the one that was just shared previously in Kenya, whether it's planting a forest, whether it's building a school, whether it's protecting, for example, a watershed, everything takes the same step, 5-step journey that you see here. Starting on the left, someone makes a commitment. It is clearly expressed what that commitment is, what is the contribution. This is in a specific, on the record. People then actually do the work. And this is also where now, through digital technologies, people and tools, like for example, human and I, can actually make that work together to make it real. This evidence of what was done, or also known proof of contribution, can be shared. So this can be done either photos or sensor data, whether it's from the macrocosm, think about satellite drones, or from the microcosm data, where it's just simply qualitative data from people participating into this process. So community testimonials, scientific measurements, all of this now can be digitally packaged, signed, and submitted. From that, on the 4th step, you can actually see then the community checking or verifying it. And this can be peers, of course, trusted observers, or automated verification models that can confirm what was claimed, that it actually really happened. And then on the end, you actually see the recognition of the flows. This can be rewards, tokens of gratitude, financial settlement, or simply a permanent record that what was done cannot be undone or forgotten. And all of this is important because words without evidence are just words. So this turns good intentions into something real and tangible that lasts, and critically, that also becomes fundable. So now finally, communities can finally see and celebrate what is actually happening on the ground, not just with what has been promised. And of course, so can investors. So my question is, how can we count more than money in this tokenized impact opportunity that we have with these new technologies coming to fruition? We have now mechanisms to turn actions into verified outcomes. Now, how do we make these outcomes financeable? This is what I call tokenized impact. Every verified outcome, as the ones I mentioned previously, whether it is a ton of carbon sequestrated, whether it's a kilowatt of clean energy that is being generated, or even a hectare of biodiversity restored, becomes a digital certificate, meaning a claim that is backed by cryptographically verified data that anyone around the world can actually verify and attest to its verifiability. And the verifiability of something real happening in the world. So again, this is not a promise, not a projection. It is a verified outcome by data and by the peers who stand behind those models. So think about carbon outcomes, education outcomes, clean energy outcomes, nature health, industrial compliance, you name it. Any other verified outcome state that people care about or are willing to invest in and work towards or spend their money on. And this becomes really important because this infrastructure is not limited to what, for example, a government currently might measure or what markets currently price. It can really grow to count anything a community decide matters. So this is why I'm so excited about what the Earth team is doing to kind of have that conversation at a planetary scale, where now the community who represents and is in behalf of conservation of a planet can really start deciding what matters and how to unlock the value of that into the market forces that today are ripping the world apart, to actually channel that energy into doing the regeneration that the world needs. And again, this impact tokens, as you may call them, don't sit necessarily in an impact silo. We're talking about being built directly into financial transactions, for example, capital allocations or even government expenditures, or business processes, as well as consumer products, where we're talking about, for example, verifiable supply chain transparency, where people now have the option to really vote where their money is. So think about every dollar, euro, or Swiss franc, or whatever currency out there being spent carrying a verified record of what is actually producing, not in a self-reported way, which can be easily greenwashed as we are used to, but actually verified. So this is the bridge, a bridge from what I showed you in the previous slide, where we have this multiple forms of capital to an economy that finally can account for all of these forms of capital. What I want to show you here is one of our current examples of where we are currently deploying this. And as you see here, this is Mayumba, where we have a fascinating project in Gabon, where we are in the process of creating a special economic zone for nature finance. And this also happens to be a biodiversity hotspot of maritime and mountainous landscapes, where essentially think about mountain elephants, mountain gorillas connect with leatherback turtles and humpback whales in the coast. So this has been an environment that has been preserved. And fortunately, the family office that owns it or has a 100-year concession on it really wants to keep it as a benchmark for actually what regeneration can look like, because it is an intact environment. So here I'm showing you a bit of a more sophisticated example of how these things come together. So on the left-hand side, as I mentioned, think about satellites that are constantly monitoring the landscape continuously, that can even measure if a tree was cut or not, that are constantly fine. They also have had, for example, 10 years of field sensors where there's bioacoustics. There's also camera traps. They have a relatively strong senses around the biodiversity that's happening in the ground. But there's also field sensors like tracking of water quality, air composition, as I mentioned, biodiversity signals, and all of this real-time data flowing into a contextual AI layer. At the centerpiece is what you see is the Mayumba Bioregional Impact Zone. So this is what we're calling it, essentially a impact zone where the impact across a polygon can be measured, where every ecosystem, every community territory, whatever economic activity can be geolocated and time-stamped. And on the right-hand side, you see all of those data flows flowing into a causal AI verification model, which is able to produce independently verifiable impact claims. And all of these claims feed this, what you could conceptualize as a digital twin, which is a live shared model of the landscape economy. And at the end of that chain, you can produce something like, for example, what we're calling it here is a total nature certificate, which is issued and is real, backed up by this real world evidence that everybody can go see, not only in the digital, but also in the physical. This is what we call the Internet of Impacts. So every single signal that is relevant from a living system can be connected, can be verified, and can be made visible to all of the stakeholders involved into this, and simultaneously without any delay. So we have essentially a shared state of truth in which everybody can converge around the table and make decisions. So in this context, as you can imagine, the landscape is no longer invisible. It is actually the most legible asset in the room. So that becomes game changer. I want to now go into this model around that you see here. This is like an impact wheel, where if you can think about the analogy of how nature records its own history. Think about the rings of a tree, where every ring is a year, and each ring captures, for example, the moisture, the temperature, the stress, the abundance of that season. The whole story of the tree's life written in its own structure. This is the same principle that we are applying in this format, where you have a living ledger, where instead of measuring impact through isolated reports, you have a single visualization of all of these things coming together and being investable, not in an individual silo, but as a whole. So the biosphere, the communities that make that biosphere come to life and steward it, and also the economy. Of course, whatever is happening on the ground that sustains both is what we're gaming this design towards. So these domains are not measured separately. Again, they're integrated into a single record of what is actually happening on the landscape. So this again becomes a operation system for a living economy, not a report, not just a dashboard, but actually a living, breathing record of continuously updated and independently verified, which is shared across all of the stakeholders. So in this model, the objective is that nature is no longer treated as an externality, which is currently in our economic system, but it actually becomes the operating system of a new economy that has the ability to outcompete the current system in its own game. What I want to show you here is what I call this flywheel, and to show you what happens when the vitality of a landscape becomes visible. So on the top part, you see the capital, a capital which can flow now to enterprises and infrastructure, whether it's ecotourism, whether it's sustainable fisheries, for example, region agriculture. All of these nature-based services that are happening on the ground are supporting these enterprises, which in turn support the communities which create livelihoods, in which they share also economic benefit from all what's happening on the ground in an open and transparent way, where the predistribution of value is predetermined. And all of this strengthens, of course, local governance and gives people on the ground inclusion in terms of what's going on the field. And then through the stewardship practices, of course, this has a reinforcing effect that creates healthier ecosystems, which in turn obviously creates gains in landscape vitality, which is verified through data. And of course, this again creates long-term economic value, which again attracts more capital. So this is the flywheel of a living economy, which is self-reinforcing, and interestingly enough, it compounds over time. Just as our current systems compound simply cash for keeping it on the account, we actually have ways now to invest into nature that compounds just as nature becomes more complex. So each rotation of this wheel creates a strengthening of the system and increases the value of the whole. So when all of this vitality becomes visible, it also becomes investable. And here I just want to show you a little bit how it looks in terms of the screen. Each of these points on the map are signals, and all of these signals are feeding the impact ledger that I showed you previously. And on the left-hand side, you see in terms of backend infrastructure, how we are actually using all of these models as blueprints. So whatever happens on one bioregion can actually be replicated as a blueprint in another bioregion, but of course adapted to its own cultural and biodiverse and essentially context. So, and this is, as I mentioned, just in alpha, which what you see right now today is only going to get richer as more interventions and communities can actually be integrated into the operation system for planetary health. And yeah, I just wanted to say we have already a network of organizations and bioregions wanting to show up, where ranging from the Mesoamerica to the Organization of the Treaties of Cooperation of the Amazon, also to the work we're doing here in the Alps, where there's sufficient people and organization wanting to connect to these tools and be part of the change they want to see into the world. And yeah, I just wanted to close because I know we already have a little bit of time, where what I want to leave you with is essentially this: the concept of the world we already exists, the world we want already exists out there, is just in pieces. So our work that I see here is actually how do we connect and weave these pieces into a unified whole. The communities are there, the knowledge is there, the different land-based projects are there, the intention, the will, the capital is also somewhere. What has been missing is really this core infrastructure that allows us to weave these pieces together and to make the invisible visible and to make the unmeasured measurable as well. So this is what we are building, not a platform, not a product, but an operating system for communities that want to create and govern and benefit from their own regeneration. And I think the motto that kind of ties this is really the aspect of collaborating locally and verifying this now through global frameworks that can scale systemically. So with that, I want to say thank you for your attention and passing it over onwards to Steve, and happy to go wherever the conversation wants to take us.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Franz. And I'm sure we have some questions here. I have some. I think some people's heads are spinning in a good way too. So, let's just get into it. It's a different kind of presentation than we're used to. So that's interesting for me, although it does speak to a couple things we've talked about recently. Basically, we all want the people with money out there to invest in planetary health. And we know that some big institutions want to invest in that because they're basically investing in stability, a stable planet. But also we've talked recently about this Grand Canyon between, those who are, getting their hands dirty and doing frontline planetary protection, the planet protectors, and all this money that is way up there at the top of that canyon, ready to be dispersed. And like you said at the beginning of the presentation, it's going to be triggered by, verification certificates. And a lot of people can't necessarily afford to pay for verification. And what you've presented today is right up the alley of what we're working on with our own token. And that's what I didn't used to understand it. Now I like it. It's basically getting recognized, like you said, points, badge of honor that you can show the folks that have all that money. So thanks for that. And I'm going to open it up. I've got some questions, but I will yield the floor here. And I'm trying to monitor for any hands up in the air. Because maybe while people are thinking of what they want to ask, I did want to, maybe we can, we'll stop sharing screens so we can see each other. But you did mention that there were some projects that were getting lined up, including Mesoamerica, some blue carbon stuff. Tell us more. What do you mean they're lining up? They're lining up for you guys' support for the verification system, or what's going on there?
Yeah, all of the above. So, how we operate is we have essentially the ability to create digital twin of these systems to be able to make it investable and monetizable. So in that we have quite a broad amount of different contracts out there. And perhaps just to mention a few, right now we have an interesting contract with UNICEF around South Africa, where we're creating a youth opportunities marketplace for the youngsters out there in the green and blue economy. So essentially empowering a lot of organizations in the ground to do their DMRV automated, which obviously reduces their costs of creating impact, but also exciting is that we can actually connect the youth who are currently either unemployed or underemployed into this solution so that they can also be part of that solution. So it's really how this connective infrastructure allows us to bridge impact finance from whoever is helping to produce from the funders. So kind of how do you connect that? Another example, and this is probably the largest project that we're currently working on. This is in Zambia and Malawi, where we have, and this is in the energy space, where we have a emerging cooking solution fleet using cook stoves, modern cook stoves that have an IoT device attached to them so that they're able to measure in real time how much they're consuming, how much they're being used. And from that, we're able to calculate what is the mitigation outcome for actually opting for a clean cooking solution versus using charcoal, which would be creating negative effects in primary forests, but also in the health of society. And we are very lucky to have the Click Foundation of Switzerland, which is the entity that the government of Switzerland created to honor its signing of Article 6 and Article 9 in terms of carbon mitigation. supporting this. So we have a offtake agreement with them already, buying our produce ITMOs, so internationally traded mitigation outcomes. So this is like a next evolution from carbon credits into something that is more scientifically robust and auditable, already using all of this impact finance technology. So these are just two examples from the field.
Yeah, good stuff. Feel free, anybody, to put your hand. Oh, there we got one. Bruno, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Steve and Franz. Thanks a lot for the presentation. I really like the logic of that you've explained to us. I think it makes a lot of sense. So, a couple of questions just to understand a little bit better. One, that's an easy one. When you talk about peers or trusted advisors, how do you go about, selecting a trusted advisor? Maybe in the case of the project that you discussed. But then two questions, really. What do you mean by a causal AI verification model? If you can elaborate on that so that we understand a little bit better what it is. And then when you get to total nature certificate, how does one redeem those certificates? I mean, what is the value of those certificates, and what form does it take in terms of, if you want to redeem those certificates, what is it going to bring you? Is that money? Is that access to capital? I mean, so if you can elaborate on these two things in particular, that would be very, very useful. But I think the logic is impeccable. I mean, it's really quite interesting.
Thank you, Bruno. These are great questions. I'm really glad you posed them. Let me start from 3 and go back to your question. So your question around total nature certificates and how you redeem them. What we're doing, think about a total nature certificate as a share of the ecological value creation that is happening on the land. So in that land that I showed you, for example, the current family office has already invested around, I think, 100 million pounds in creating a port. They have obviously agroforestry, they have agrotourism that they're wanting to step in. So these are like different revenue streams that are happening on that land. And what the digital twin aims to do is to verify that whatever economical activity doesn't necessarily infringe on the ecological aspect of what happens on the land. So what we're actually doing is digitalizing those value flows and creating an impact finance feedback loop in which all of those revenue fields go into a common treasury that is redistributed to whoever is holding a share into the bioregional total nature token. So think about if you own a share of a company and that company gives you a dividend. We're doing the same thing, but for nature finance, where essentially people can actually buy and invest into the outcomes that are balanced in terms of ecology and economy. So then the idea in terms of how do you create value on land doesn't become as we're used to today, which is how do you create a monoculture, or you can price the value of the forest more for the wood than actually the ecosystem services it does. It becomes how can I create multiple revenue streams on top of a already very complex and incredibly rich environment. So that's a whole paradigm shift that we can now restructure to unlock outcomes that benefit both people and the planet in that case. So this is right now at a very early stage what we're doing, but the mathematics that we're looking at are pretty solid. That actually makes it a very powerful case to invest. So that's hopefully gives you an idea for the point 3. If I may go back around the second question, which is around causal AI. And this is also something that been going back and forth a little bit with Steve and the Sinocast team. What we've developed on the IXO network is this model around leveraging Bayesian statistics to determine causality in a system. So if we're able to kind of plug in any theory of change, and you have essentially a step towards kind of creating that outcome that you're doing, you can actually have a weighted average for each of these data points that actually result in the outcome. So what we're enabling with this strong causal AI models is to really have the attestability that one point in the framework or one signal is actually directly related to the outcome. And if we're able to make that case solidly through Bayesian statistics, we're able to also attribute rewards to whatever is going into the model based on who helped to achieve it. And this is also kind of ties into your first question around trusted advisors. There's many layers in terms of how trust is created in a network. In what I showed you right now, just so you have in mind, there's multiple types of data, right? There's data that is essentially static, that we don't know where the provenance of that data is. And there's also, I distinguish between verifiable data, which is very different, which actually has a cryptographic proof in the moment where it was created, and has different things like cryptographic time and geolocation attestation. But there's many different factors in terms of how you can kind of determine the accurate weightage around a numerical signal in a model. So when it comes to trusted advisors, the idea is to have a very solid, robust data model, and at the same time have the advisors or the verifiers who are experts in that field, but at the same time bring others who might not necessarily be to kind of have a complete 360 view of actually having a open systems model that is auditable, that anyone can improve on. So if someone says, oh, you guys verified that this tree was able to kind of have a bigger yield or led to more carbon sequestration, you can actually have that in an open auditable framework that anyone in the world can say, but actually that might not be right. So we're actually using the power of crowd intelligence to optimize models. So it becomes very interesting in the sense that right now there's essentially so many different KPIs and indexes around who do things more correctly or better, and they're all kind of competing for the limelight. We take a very different approach in which we actually just have the open system model that any KPI or way of measuring can be validated, and based on that impact that is then attested, so you're able to really bring in the right people at the right time to look at whatever theory of change is being put into these processes. So ideally, what we would love to do is really have this open systems, open source sort of collaboration of verifiers that are trusted, in the sense that, of course, we have in the crypto model a way where if you have a model and that model is being verified and they're part of that channeling of the funds, if that verifier is consistently doing the right thing, his reward for participating and providing his expertise into being a trusted advisor is also tied into his reputation. So we're also able to kind of put that also in the causality model of who's there. So what this becomes is really then an open framework of balancing supply for regeneration with the demand for regeneration in a open systems model, which really unlocks us to provide the finance right where it's needed.
Franz, I want to jump in with a couple other questions here from our floor. They've typed them in there from two of my favorite people, Shelley Rothman and Carol Baskin. Shelley asks, how does a community get started in this process? What are the first steps? And since we're short on time, I'll put the second question in also. Carol asks, what has actually driven early adoption? Has it been regulatory pressure, consumer demand, or did you need anchor investors or government mandates to get the first buyers into the market? So, sorry, this is before organic demand could follow. And then we've got another question after that, but why don't you tackle those two?
Great, yeah. I really appreciate Shelley's question. How do we really operationalize with the community? And it's always a very human approach. What we usually do is we bring a the community itself and its multi-stakeholder network in one table. And what I usually do is essentially a bit of a reverse engineering. So think about a participatory process where that community is deciding where they want to be in, let's say, 10 years or 50 years, 100 years. Once you have all of the members articulating that vision, then you're able to kind of have a shared purpose in terms of where we're going. And based on that, you can really reverse engineering what are the steps to get you to that vision. And this is where then these technologies come into the focus, that you're able to kind of have all of the steps towards that shared vision populated granularly in a platform like this, where people can just fill in the blanks and verify what their contributions are and keep each other accountable. And all of this is now being accounted by that technology, which makes it also investable. So those are the first steps to essentially bring the community together, have them decide where they want to go as a community, and from that vision, really break up the steps that lead to make that vision manifest. And the technology is then able to then automate and facilitate that process to step by step get you to that vision. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of answer to that. And if I may jump into the next one right away. What has actually driven adoption? This is a very good question too. I think it's a bit of a mix. Just to give you an idea, I started in this journey from a very sort of out of the beaten path, in the sense that, when I realized that with other networks that the demand for this is so huge, we essentially just decided to do it. And just from that action, we managed to get a lot of people who are already raising capital with these technologies to successfully do it. And that's been, relatively small in compared to what climate finance is doing, but it's been successful. So the demand is there. So the beautiful thing around what I see is that the gap for adoption in terms of how our current financial system creates market failures really creates a massive demand for people to do things differently. And if we're able to connect that with new tools, I think things will move much faster than when we know which we think is possible. The other side of the equation is, in terms of regulatory pressure, regulatory pressure for sure is a very strong one, like Article 6, Article 9. I think there are some governments and institutions that are really looking for that high integrity way of doing things, and we're definitely doing everything we can to align into what that is. But the other side is obviously the consumer demand. I think essentially people have a choice to vote with their money into what they're doing, and unfortunately today the problem has been that we usually don't have choices. When we go to the grocery store, all of the other forms of capital, or in terms of what took to create a product and bring it to market, are usually hidden in the market costs and the prices. So all of these externalities are usually lost. But if we were able to really have a supply chain transparency that is verifiable, I think that's going to also drive consumer demand to choose for the products that are actually doing the extra mile to do the right thing. So I think ultimately what we should be focusing in is in the convergence of all 3 points. So really the demand side, the supply side, and also the regulatory framework that makes this thing also much more scalable and institutional money to flow in.
Thanks, Franz. And before I go to Hans's question, I just want to remind people, so we've had Franz come today because basically he's been on board with Earth Team as our advisor. We knew that he'd gone down this path before of creating a token economy and to develop blockchain-based tokens to track and reward collaboration, action, and impact. And so he's been our advisor as we have been developing both the app and the token with Zinocast. And so we can learn from what worked and what didn't before, and to also possibly explore bridging to some of these other existing projects, technologies, and communities, because it's all based on data and verification. So, and what we're going back and forth about is we want to make sure that the verification system we design that goes into an app that can go into everybody's hands who has a smartphone does not look like something that, you feel like you need to be Einstein. We want to popularize it, make it user-friendly, democratize it, and at the same time, it's every bit as robust as all those verification companies out there that do produce papers with all these calculations that do look like Einstein wrote them. So that's what we're trying to do with our token, which we'll be starting to talk about next month. We wanted to segue there. Hans had a question. Do I understand it right that the balance sheet of the token value is all split in the different kind of capitals with a verified audit trail in respect of data, services, and value?
Good question. Yes, and so think about the balance sheet, what we have here in the digital world, we call it a graph database. So think about, instead of like having a balance sheet where you have a piece of paper, now we have a tempo-spatial living ledger for multiple contributions as defined by the community, as I was answering Shelley's question. So technically, we can really have an overarching token that accounts for the whole, and there are communities that choose simply for that. But you can actually have, technically speaking, infinitely sub-ledgers. So if you have essentially someone, let's say, there are some funds or some investors that have a special focus on purpose, you can actually go also as granularly as you want. So that gives us the flexibility to do both an entire sort of ecosystem token model, but also the sub-ledgers that allow you to have specific sub-ledger systems within it that can be then attached with different modes of data and services and value attributed to them. So it's quite a flexible system if you see it like that. And depending on the use case, you can do either or all of the above, or a mixture, a combination of all of these things. And maybe just to kind of add into this with Freeland and Earth Team, I think just to give you an insight around that, in this first stage, we want to have a general token that allows us to have a single token ecosystem for planetary contributions as defined also by the community and the experts that are brought to verify the things. But of course, in the future, we could also select to have sub-ledgers for specific bioregions, for example, or specific verticals that are parts of the regeneration that the world needs. So all options are on the table.
Yeah. Well, that's the top of the hour, folks. We can stick around a little bit for some other questions, but I want to remind you that coming back to our own token, where we're setting up a democratized popular verification system right along the lines of what Franz has been talking about, we've put out a survey for the name of the token. We've had the working name, Earthstar. But we do want to give everybody a chance who's going to be involved in this to vote. And Liza, I know you're here. Can you just, Liza Lorene, Liza, are you there? Can you just?
Yeah. Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. Liza's been sort of leading the charge, she's working on the marketing. Liza, why don't you just tell us quickly what you're doing with the token name survey and where we're at. I understand it's a dead heat between three names right now.
Okay, so my name is Liza. I'm an intern at Freeland. I was working on the form to get responses on which name is appropriate. So we had Earth Credit, Earth Coin, Earth Star, Earth Token, and Earth Merit. The biggest percentage that answered the form was students, which was 51%. And a lot of people are more inclined with the Earth Star because I feel like most people say that it sounds good and it's easy to remember and it kind of feels like it's something prestigious. Yeah. And most people also want it to be recognized on their LinkedIn professional profile or CV. Yeah, that is what I was able to gather.
Very good. Eliza's out of college now. She's based here in Nairobi. So we're testing the markets that we can, some globally, but some going out and talking to people in person. So we'll put that survey back into the chat. Liza, why don't you put it into the chat here? We'll put it into the WhatsApp group chat. If anybody wants to join that, I think we're up to like 70 or 75 people now in that group chat for Earth Team. You're welcome to join. And it takes 2 minutes to do this survey. It's really easy. And you just kind of give your gut reaction to what sounds best. There it is. Thank you. So we'll leave this on for a little bit in case anyone wants to click that and take the survey. Franz, thank you very much for showing up today and giving us your experience and wisdom as we apply this to our own token program that's in development with the very hard work of Zinocast and everybody else working on it, Kartika and Liza, Madison, myself, Prayana, and others. Next month, we think we will have the Comb Green Solution urban community-based and conservation project come and talk to us. And we welcome everybody to come back for that. And if anybody wants to join the coordination unit, we're going to stay right on at this same link after this call. And like I said, we're putting out a report in a couple of weeks. If anybody wants to know more about that and how they can help get it out, it's going to be a strong one. Feel free to stick around for that too. So thank you, everybody. And please come back to Earth Team and be the power. Bye for now.